West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
All right, Mark, this is a case that's going to be decided at the Supreme Court any moment now that will have major implications for the January 6th insurrectionists. And I think with the presidential case, the presidential immunity case pending, this one has really flown under the radar. But obviously, this is huge here. Can you talk about the Fisher case?
Yeah, so you're exactly right. The Fisher case is arguably as big and as important as any of the other cases that are pending before the U.S. Supreme Court, including the immunity case. And here's why. Many of the January 6th insurrectionists were charged and pled guilty or were convicted under a statute that was amended and toughened as a result of the financial crisis as part of what's called the Sarbanes-Oxley law. And this toughening of the law said that if you are involved in obstructing an official proceeding of the government, you are subject to enhanced criminal penalties, right? It's not just that it's a felony, but that the potential sentences are much longer. And so this has been the cornerstone of the cases that have been brought against the bulk of the violent insurrectionists. You know, it's the cases against the handful of leaders for very, very serious things have been different. You know, you've had a couple charged with treason, and then you've had some low-level people who have just been charged with, like disorderly conduct. But a lot of the people who, when we talk about the January 6th insurrectionists, they have been charged under this statute, and conservatives on the Supreme Court may dismantle this law as it applies to the insurrectionists while leaving it in place for other purposes.
Okay, so if the Supreme Court rules in the insurrectionists' favor here, what happens to these January 6 rioters who are right now either convicted or incarcerated as the result of this statute?
Yeah, so a number of them could see those convictions overturned. They could see them be subject to resentencing under lower penalties. It could have really, really big consequences. Donald Trump, for example, has been indicted for violating this particular statute. Now, he's been indicted for other statutes as well, so it wouldn't dismiss the indictment the way the immunity case would if he got absolute immunity. But have no doubt that Donald Trump would claim that he was vindicated.
Right.
Donald Trump and the Republicans would claim that the January 6th insurrectionists are, what's the term they use? Hostages, right? They would say this is just evidence. So there's a lot of big stakes here. And I want to say again, this is not alarmism. The conservatives on the Supreme Court gave us, some pretty strong indications that they are looking for a way not to apply this statute.
Do you think it was a mistake for prosecutors to prosecute the insurrectionists under this specific statute? I'm assuming if you engage in an insurrection against the U.S. government, that there are a whole raft of statutes that prosecutors could have chosen from in terms of prosecuting these folks. So do you think it was a mistake to choose this one, or would conservatives have just taken any statute that they used and tried to turn it on its head in an effort to absolve them after the fact?
I have to say, I have been critical of a lot of oral arguments in the U.S. Supreme Court. I've been critical of a lot of court decisions by the U.S. Supreme Court. There is no argument that I ended listening to where I was left more dispirited or concerned about the interplay of ideology and politics with textualism and other conservative theories than this one. I mean, the statute at issue, and I've tried to keep this at a high level of generality, not to get people too dragged into the weeds, but the statute at issue makes it a felony to corruptly obstruct, influence, or impede any official proceeding. Okay? By its plain terms, the congressional meeting, the joint session of Congress, when they count these ballots, is an official proceeding. And by its plain terms, if you are, assaulting police officers, if you are breaking down barricades, if you are smashing in windows, if you are taking over the House and Senate floor, you are obstructing and impeding that official proceeding. So honestly, Brian, I don't think we should be faulting the Department of Justice for relying on a statute that says what it says.
Right. Mark, if the Supreme Court rules that in the insurrectionist's favor in this case, and again, we'll get the results, within hours, days now, what are going to be the implications in the event of another January 6th style violent attack?
Yeah, so let's start with the fact that if they rule in the insurrectionist's favor, they are giving a permission structure. Now, I want everyone to be clear. I'm not saying they are blessing. I'm not saying they say it is good or it's okay. But they are giving a permission structure to MAGA Republicans, to Donald Trump, to claim that they have been vindicated. Okay? They won't be vindicated, but they are creating that permission structure to treat it as a vindication. And when you put it on top of that, the fact that, two of the spouses of presumably the Supreme Court justices who would rule in that direction have shown sympathies in one form or another with January 6th defendants or the events of January 6th, they are creating an even stronger permission structure. So I worry very much that before you get to what would it mean for charging decisions if there was another January 6th, think about what the implications are for causing another January 6th or creating the impression in people who have been lied to by the big lie, people who have been lied to by Donald Trump, people who have been embraced election denialism. What message are they going to take away? Well, they're going to take away the message that the Department of Justice was part of a deep state going after these people for no good reason, and the Supreme Court threw it out. And I think that creates a very, very dangerous position, a very, very dangerous situation as we head towards the final months of an election where Donald Trump is already inciting acts of violence. He is already, through his rhetoric, prepping his supporters to not accept the outcome of an election. So I worry less, Brian, that that the Department of Justice wouldn't be able to find charges against another violent attack. And I worry a lot that this will create, like I said, a permission structure for people to feel like the violence was justified.
Well, all of this kind of strikes me as especially dangerous because, as you mentioned, the text of this statute is quite clear. So what are the implications of other statutes then if the plain text here can be so easily manipulated by these judges or justices to kind of comport with their political ideologies? Like, doesn't that put the whole, the whole system of law into jeopardy if you can have a very clear statute like the one that we're dealing with right now and the judges just say, like, nope, that's not what it means anymore because it doesn't comport with how I feel?
Look, I think that we are entering into a new level of danger that we have not seen. It is one thing for the Supreme Court to take a cramped view of the text of the Constitution and what it means, okay? Second Amendment jurisprudence, I would say, falls into that category. It is even worse for the Supreme Court to disregard settled precedent because there is a change in composition of the court and take away fundamental rights, like we saw in Dobbs. I would argue we are now going one step further, which is that the Supreme Court in this case and in the immunity case would have to affirmatively disregard the text. I mean, you cannot make an argument that obstruct, influence, or impede an official proceeding does not apply on its plain text to January 6th. You cannot argue that the U.S. Constitution confers immunity, absolute immunity on a president when there is no textual support for it and there's no originalist support. We are going into a new uncharted territory where it is just conservative vibism is the doctrine of the Supreme Court. It is like whatever vibe the conservatives on the Supreme Court feel like ought to be the law. And that, Brian, will be a very, very dangerous place for the Supreme Court to be, given the challenges to its legitimacy. And as you say, it makes it impossible to predict what other statutes, what other constitutional provisions the court will decide doesn't sort of meet their vibe for where they think the law ought to go.
Which, by the way, underscores as we head toward this election, Clarence Thomas and Samuel Alito are 75 and 74 years old. If Donald Trump gets reelected, he will replace both of those people with 40-year-olds in their mold to carry out their work for the rest of our lives, basically. So even if you're not down with Biden for whatever reason in this election, think about the Supreme Court. That's what's at stake. That's what this election's about as we head toward November. It's going to be the Supreme Court and the implications of this court on cases, involving democracy, gun rights, abortion rights, contraception, IVF, same-sex marriage, fair maps, Voting Rights Act, which we talk about ad nauseum here, and just on and on. So that's really what we're looking at as we head toward November.
It is Thursday, the 27th of June of 2024, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner, the English bulldog, is our snoozing sous chef. Precious, the little Yorkie, is our door girl, and we're still going to be seating you directly ourselves for our especially daily special, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. That's right, only a little. No, it could be a lot too. Yes, little Precious, she is, we hope, on the mend. Okay, I haven't heard from Dr. Dickey yet about his consultation with the oncologist. But he brightened when I had Gunner in there and he asked about how Precious was doing. And I said that, she's, every now and then she seems a little listless or just wants to rest, but she's been pretty good. And I told him about our foray down south and how she was acting like a puppy. She was around a lot of people and walking around and doing a little dance, and how she'd get on her back and want me to rub her stomach and all. And he brightened when he said that. So maybe the steroids are attending to the steroidal meningitis, and that's what it is. Okay, so anyway, she is resting at the moment. We're going to let her sleep, okay? She actually was quite active yesterday and had a good appetite. And I got her to eat her half a pill that I hide in a little bit of food until I know that she's taking it. Then she gets the rest of it. Oh, yes, I must mention, Gunner weighs 77 pounds, and he needs to lose weight. So I'm trying to get him to lose a few pounds here in the next couple of weeks because he goes in for a checkup, and if he doesn't lose any pounds, I got to cut back even more on his food. So I guess we need to do a combination of reduction of calories and the burning of calories. Can we do that? Well, we'll try. Okay, so what else is going on in the world except for the fact that we have a corrupt judiciary that's been stacked by the Federalist Society, the Heritage Foundation, etc. What is it about the right wing that just promotes such terrible lawlessness? My God. And they blame the welfare queens. Yeah, we know what they mean when they say that. We've been Atwatered before, and we're not going to go to the well anymore with Atwater, if you can follow that little connection. Phew, boy. Oblique, obscure, and out of the way. I got all the O's there now. So, what are we going to do about it? I suppose what we can do is make sure that we vote in overwhelming numbers, because they're going to, they're going to contest it anyway. I, of course, had to put myself into the bubble today. And I know that these decisions have come down, and the Fisher case may have been decided, and I may have to turn around during the break and find out if what the hell has happened with that one. Are we going to have insurrections great again? They're going to say the administrative state has no business making a statute preventing people from trying to violently overthrow the government. And all these hostages must be released. Oh, my God. Alito and Thomas got to vote on that decision. Not recuse. Vote. An integral part of that decision. And then you got Gorsuch and you got Kavanaugh, who were there in 2000 rioting in the Miami-Dade election office, and they were the Brooks Brothers rioters, and they were saying, "Stop the count! Stop the count!" And the people inside were so intimidated they had to stop the count, and they did. They stopped the count. Because if the count had continued as it was supposed to, count the votes, Gore would have been president. Stop the count. 3 counties in 2 states decided whether Hillary Clinton was going to be president or not, and she wasn't. The manipulation of votes in 3 counties in 2 states. That's granular. How'd they get that? Well, we found out in the Mueller report, didn't we? Oh, we don't know if that's a crime, though. Because he's president now. Yeah, no shit, Sherlock. Are we going to let that happen again? Had to get into another tete-a-tete with a usual suspect here in our hamlet of former sundown towns that are seeing a resurgence again, by the way. Yeah, sundown towns around America, and they're going to come up here too. As if they haven't already. We've actually just off into a little tangent here. We had some sundown towns arise during the Malheur incident when the Bundys took over the bird reserve or the animal reserve up there in the mountains, because some ranchers had in an attempt to hide their poaching on federal land, set the forest on fire. So they had to pay a fine for not only poaching, but setting the forest on fire. That was a step too far for the Bundys. We have to protect these people's property rights to do with federal land what they see fit. And they took over a game reserve. Violently, by the way. And then, not just on the route up to Malheur, but just, in Southern Oregon, there were some towns where they said, you can't come in here. Who are you? Especially if you're of a color. So we're going to see that resurging even more so. But I had a little tete-a-tete with what is the truth? The only way to get the truth is by Fox News, and that's the only way, according to this fellow. Okay. Oh, and I was also told Obama is really POTUS, not Demented Joe. And the only way to get the only truth is by Fox News. Okay, just so you know where we're coming from. This is what I have to deal with. Oh, my God. It's a propaganda shop. And I just tell them that. It's a propaganda shop. You're in love with Demented Joe. Well, look, first of all, I don't fall in love with politicians. But he certainly seems to be in love with a mobbed-up Russian money launderer and convicted felon. I'd like to remind them of that also. Whenever I refer to Donald Trump to any MAGA, I always refer to him as a mobbed-up Russian money launderer and convicted felon. I get to add that one on now. That's so fun. For years, there was a mobbed-up Russian money launderer. Now we get to say, and convicted felon. I could also say adjudicated rapist. I could. Convicted felon and adjudicated rapist. Mobbed-up Russian money launderer. Convicted felon and adjudicated rapist. Actually, that does roll off the tongue if you can do that. If you can roll it off the tongue. And I just did. Yes, I did. Okay, so we got that going. And also now bribery is illegal, except you have to call it gratuities because gratuities are people, my friends. No wonder Trump's out there saying, I'm going to take a tax off gratuities because he doesn't want to pay the tax on his gratuities. I keep telling people, oh, yeah, he's going to take taxes away from little people. No, he's going to increase it because he's going to take the tax off of his gratuities. Boy, you got to read between the lines and you got to know how this guy projects. It's all projection. I'm going to take the tax off gratuities. Now bribery is called gratuities. No wonder. And how did he get that info? That's what I want to know. Deep state my ass. Whenever they say they want to get rid of the deep state, what they mean is they want to entrench the deep state even more because the only people who came up with the idea of the deep state was the people who are in the deep state. So, I don't know. Like getting rid of no-fault divorce. I mean, come on. The only people who want to get rid of no-fault divorce are the kind of people who would never find fault with anything that they do. No wonder. Jeez. H. Christ, and I mean that literally. What the hell are we allowing to happen? Is this... No. I refuse. I am not going to allow people to say, oh, and Fox is the only way to get the truth. Why is that station allowed on our military bases? Is it still being broadcast still? How is that possible? Get it off now. It is psyops. We have people who believe that you should drink bleach. Put a UV light up your butt. Obama is really the president, and he's directing Joe with an earphone in his ear. Well, Joe is jacked up on some sort of Mountain Dew dementia cure. Fox is the only way to get the truth, my God. Oh, and then I was also told, because I have a picture of my mom and I, actually the last picture of my mom and I, and this guy wanted to get in a little dig because, he knows my mom. He knows that she's passed. He said, didn't your mother teach you there's two sides of every story? Actually, my mom and my dad taught me that there's more than two sides to every story. And if you really want to try to divine the truth and not really know the truth, but divine it, you got to come at it from as many different sides as possible. You come at it from two sides. You got black and white. Obama is president. Birther BS. Yeah, it's black and white to that guy. And I also reminded him that the black guy broke the MAGA brain, and he's an example of the brain still being broken, and now I'm going to feel the wrath of people say, you're such a bad neighbor. Am I? Maybe I speak up for the ones who, keep hunkered down because you guys are a bunch of lunatics, capable of anything. You can muster hundreds of armed militia types because you think busloads of Antifa and Black Lives Matter is going to come across the bridge into our little town and take it over and make us be good neighbors. You can't force us to be good neighbors. We're Americans. Yeah. I'm an American. They're Americant. That's who they want to be president. The Americant. Well, you know what? We're Americans. And even though it got me kicked off Twitter for quite some time, and it got me kicked off Facebook for quite some time, punch the Nazis. Americans punch Nazis. Americans ban the Nazi punchers. Okay? Which side of history do we want to be on? Well, I would like to be a rich Nazi puncher. But if I'm a comfortable Nazi puncher, I think that's just as good. Okay? But I'm not going to be rich at the expense of giving up being a Nazi puncher. Bull as pucky. As my Midwestern relatives would say. The heartland of America. Okay. I maintain the heartland of America are Nazi punchers. And propaganda and brainwashing by Fox has made some Nazi punchers into Nazis. Maybe because they had the, proclivity to be Nazis in the first place, so it was easy. And they are able to motivate about a third of the population, and they have more than a third of the weapons. Let's be clear about that. And that wasn't by accident either. That was completely by design, and we all said it when it was happening. Like everything else we get to say, I told you so over and over and over and over. All right, time's a-flying. I guess I should stop the rant. So hard. Gratuities are people, my friends. What do we have on the rest of the menu here on this fabulous, spicy Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays? A federal judge ruled Border Patrol officers falsely imprisoned a 9-year-old U.S. citizen, and now they must pay. Not if SCOTUS gets to it. The MAGA SCOTUS is going to take that and say, no. You must incarcerate the 9-year-old, especially if you think they're illegals. Oh, really? All right. Moving on, California lawmakers approved a budget that slashes spending and temporarily raises taxes on some businesses. Okay, we'll find out what businesses they are and how much of an outcry that'll engender. And an independent watchdog within the IRS reported delays in resolving identity theft cases are unconscionable. And that's another no shit, Sherlock. After the break, we move to the chef's table where Russia ordered an Austrian journalist out in response to Austria's expulsion of a Russian journalist. Well, that's a tit for tat. And a Bolivian general was quickly arrested after a failed coup attempt, so it can be done. What is taking so long here, huh? All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. Once again, we will forego the usuals and go to what has now become our usual MO, and that's to dig into this first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy on this fabulous Metro Shrimp and Grist Thursdays, and it is by Hannah Fry from the Los Angeles Times. U.S. Customs and Border Patrol must pay a family $1.5 million after officers falsely imprisoned a 9-year-old girl and her teenage brother entering the United States from Mexico to go to school. A federal judge ruled this month. U.S. District Judge Gonzalo Curiel ruled that the agency falsely imprisoned 2 United States citizens, Julia, who was then 9, for 34 hours, and her brother Oscar, who was then 14, for roughly 14 hours. Curiel also found that the agency was liable for intentional infliction of emotional distress and negligence in the 2019 incident, which was first reported by the San Diego Union Tribune, and I have to say, we reported it as well. The government's conduct in detaining U.S. citizen children at the border for 14 and 34 hours, respectively, exceeded all bounds of that usually tolerated in a civilized community, Curiel wrote in his ruling. A spokesperson for the U.S. Customs and Border Protection said the agency, quote, makes a good faith effort to resolve all complaints justly and fairly, including complying with orders issued by the federal district courts, end quote. Oh, I'm sorry. I suppose it continues. The health and safety of individuals in our custody, our workforce, and the communities we serve is paramount, the spokesperson wrote in an email to the Times. Yeah, they were building icebox baby gulags. We remember those days. Come on. Now, Julia and Oscar, who lived in Tijuana with their parents, were attempting to cross the border at the San Isidro port of entry to attend school in the United States on March 18th of 2019, according to the family's lawsuit filed in 2022. Now, this is something that they had been doing, and all sorts of kids have been doing for decades. The parent crossed the border many times before, but the situation took an unusual turn when they were stopped after a Border Patrol officer noticed a dot on Julia's passport photo that appeared to be a mole she did not have in person. The siblings were taken to a secondary inspection area where a supervisor selected an officer with a reputation for obtaining confessions to interview them. The officer allegedly pressured Julia to say she was actually her Mexican cousin, according to court records. No one else was in the room during the interview, which was a violation of the agency's policy, Curiel noted in his ruling. The government refuted the idea that the officers coerced the girl into falsely saying she was her cousin. They maintained in court records that she and Oscar both said, without being prompted, that the girl's name was Melanie. This confession led the officers to suspect Oscar was trafficking the girl. They just wanted an excuse, and you know that. It's like breaking a tail light and then saying, oh, you have a broken tail light. Curiel criticized the officers in his ruling for failing to interview family members who would have provided proof of the girl's identity and not reviewing documents that would have quelled their suspicions. Yeah, well, actually the family tried, and Border Patrol prevented them from doing it because that's the way the Trump regime wanted it, and that's what will happen if the Trump regime gets a chance to do it again. of the Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. California lawmakers approved a budget yesterday, Wednesday, that slashes spending and temporarily raises taxes on some businesses to close an estimated $46.8 billion budget deficit. It's the second year in a row the nation's most populous state has been forced to pare back or delay some of its progressive policies that have been fueled by record-breaking surpluses during the COVID-19 pandemic. It was just 2 years ago that Governor Gavin Newsom and his fellow Democrats in the state legislature were boasting about surpluses that totaled more than $1 billion, the product of hundreds of billions of dollars of federal COVID-19 aid and a progressive tax code that produced a windfall of revenue from the state's wealthiest residents. Those revenue spikes did not last as inflation, price gouging, slowed the state's economy on purpose, contributing to a rising unemployment rate on purpose, and a slowdown in the tech industry that had driven much of the state's growth. The Newsom administration then badly miscalculated how much money the state would have last year after a 7-month delay in the tax filing deadline. Last year's deficit was about $32 billion. This year's deficit swelled to $46.8 billion, with more deficits projected for the future, just as MAGA likes it. Now, the California's budget has historically been prone to large swings in revenue, given the state's reliance on its wealthiest taxpayers. But these deficits have come at a bad time for Newsom, who has been building his national profile ahead of a potential run for president one day, and has been tapped as one of the top surrogates for President Joe Biden's re-election campaign. So let's dirty him up in any way we can. The Times are part of that? I wonder. The budget includes an agreement that Newsom and lawmakers will try to change the state constitution in the coming years to allow California to put more money in reserve to prepare for future shortfalls. Well, that would be nice. Newsom's plan to balance the budget includes a nearly 10% cut for nearly all state departments, including eliminating thousands of vacant state worker positions. Many previous promises have been paused or delayed. 2 years ago, lawmakers pledged to help pay child care expenses for an additional 200,000 families by 2026. This budget delays that promise to 2028 with the caveat it will only happen if there is money available for it. Of the Associated Press brings us this final offering in the Bistro Cafe part of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. An independent watchdog within the IRS reported yesterday, Wednesday, that while taxpayer services have vastly improved, the agency is still too slow to resolve identity theft cases with delays that are unconscionable. Overall, the 2024 filing season went smoothly, according to the latest National Taxpayer Advocate report to Congress, especially after the IRS received a massive funding boost provided by the Democrats' Inflation Reduction Act that President Joe Biden signed into law in August of 22. Not to be overly dramatic, but during the last 4 years, I believe we have progressed from a place of despair to a place of hope and optimism for the future of the agency and therefore the taxpayers, said Aaron M. Collins, who leads the organization assigned to protect taxpayers' rights under the Taxpayer Bill of Rights. Still, she said, IRS delays in resolving identity theft victim assistance cases are unconscionable, and they're going to get to work on it, so that's good. Well, that brings us to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we've curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Welcome to A Cup of Health with CDC, a weekly feature of the MMWR, the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report. I'm your host, Dr. Kathleen Dooling. From a very young age, we're encouraged to eat fruits and vegetables. Unfortunately, many Americans are not getting the message. Dr. Seung-Hee Lee Kwan is with CDC's National Center for Chronic Disease Prevention and Health Promotion. She's joining us today to discuss the importance of eating enough fruits and vegetables. Welcome to the show, Seung-Hee.
Thank you for having me.
Seung-Hee, what is the recommended amount of fruits and vegetables?
The federal guidelines recommend that adults consume at least 1.5 cups to 2 cups of fruit and 2 to 3 cups of vegetables each day. This is for adults who get less than 30 minutes of physical activity a day. Adults who are more physically active need more calories and thus should be eating more fruits and vegetables. 1 cup is about 12 strawberries or 1 large tomato.
How many people consume the recommended amount of fruits and vegetables?
We found that very few adults are getting enough fruits and vegetables. Just 12% are eating the recommended amount of fruits, and less than 1 in 10 eat enough vegetables. And consumption is lower among men, young adults, and adults living in poverty.
Why is eating a diet rich in fruits and vegetables so important?
Eating a diet rich in fruits and vegetables can help with 3 things. 1, it can reduce the risk of many leading causes of illness and deaths, such as heart disease, type 2 diabetes, some cancers, and even obesity. It can also add important nutrients that are commonly missing in Americans' diet. And it can help with weight management if adults consume fruits and vegetables instead of other calorie-dense foods.
How can we meet the recommended daily intake of fruits and vegetables?
Try to fill half of your plate with fruits or vegetables at each meal or every eating occasion. Making fruits and vegetables the focal point of your meal will help you meet your recommendations. For example, recent studies have shown that adults get most of their fruit during breakfast and snacks. So you can try adding berries to your morning oatmeal or grab a piece of fresh fruit as an afternoon snack. For vegetables, most adults eat them at dinner, so try adding more into your lunch by adding a side salad or packing a snack of baby carrots or grape tomatoes.
Are canned or frozen products just as good as fresh?
All forms of fruits and vegetables count towards meeting the recommendations. For the most health benefits, make sure that the fruits and vegetables you consume have a limited amount of salt, butter, sugar, or creamy sauces. When selecting canned fruits, choose the ones with lowest sugars. And for canned or frozen vegetables, choose those lower in sodium.
Where can listeners get more information about eating a healthy diet?
Listeners can go to cdc.gov/nutrition or choosemyplate.gov.
Thanks, Seung-hee. I've been talking today with Seung-hee Lee Kwon about the importance of eating a healthy diet. Eating a diet rich in fruits and vegetables can help reduce the risk of many leading causes of illness and death and add important nutrients to your diet. Make sure you're eating enough. Until next time, be well. This is Dr. Kathleen Dooling for A Cup of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. And you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
You're listening to the American Democracy Minute, keeping your government by and for the people. We reported recently on the impact of Shelby County versus Holder, the U.S. Supreme Court's decision invalidating Section 5 of the 1965 Voting Rights Act. Anticipating even more erosion of the VRA, some states have passed their own state VRAs. It's not only the dismantling of Section 5, the pre-clearance requirements for states with a history of discrimination. The conservative justices also made proving racial gerrymandering harder under Section 2, and they've made it easier for a state legislature to dilute minority voting power. And in the lower courts, more cases attempting to keep individual voters from bringing voting rights lawsuits under the VRA are pending. With dwindling protections from the federal government, California, Washington, Oregon, Virginia, New York, Connecticut, and Minnesota have enacted state VRAs. Michigan, Maryland, New Jersey, and Florida have efforts underway. The NAACP Legal Defense Fund recommends that state VRAs should have pre-clearance requirements for municipalities which have patterns of discrimination. Rules should include a prohibition against vote denial or dilution through gerrymandering, strong protections against intimidation or deception, language assistance, a statewide database to make evidence-based decisions on election administration, and a directive to the state judiciary to support pro-voter and pro-democracy decisions. We have the recommendations at AmericanDemocracyMinute.org. I'm Brian Beal.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1905. That was the day over 200 socialists, anarchists, and Marxists representing over 40 organizations met at Brands Hall in Chicago to convene the founding of the Industrial Workers of the World. Representatives from groups like the Socialist Party, Socialist Labor Party, and Western Federation of Miners joined together for an 11-day convention to discuss the future of industrial unionism and revolutionary struggle. Those present included Big Bill Haywood, James Connolly, Daniel De Leon, Eugene V. Debs, Lucy Gonzalez Parsons, Mother Jones, and many more. They hoped to cohere an alternative to the politically conservative business unionism of the American Federation of Labor. They sought to build on the legacy of the Knights of Labor and their motto of "an injury to one is an injury to all." They were determined to build an industrial union that organized workers regardless of skill level. They also distinguished themselves by opening their doors to men and women, black, white, white and all immigrant workers, including Asians. Big Bill Haywood opened the first day's morning session with the following remarks, saying, quote, "This is the Continental Congress of the working class. We are here to confederate the workers of this country into a working class movement that shall have as its purpose the emancipation of the working class from the slave bondage of capitalism. There is no organization that has for its purpose the same object as that for which you are called together today. The aims and objects of this organization should be to put the working class in possession of the economic power, the means of life, in control of the machinery of production and distribution without regard to capitalist masters." For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. We always begin, whether from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 61 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting highs in the low 80s, so even cooler than yesterday. Some clouds this morning will give way to generally sunny skies in the afternoon, with winds out of the northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Clear to partly cloudy overnight with lows in the mid-50s. Winds out of the north-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. Then sunny skies tomorrow and a bit warmer with highs in the mid to upper 80s. Winds out of the north-northwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And it looks like we should have highs around, 85 to 88 over the weekend, which will be quite pleasant, and which means that we may be able to have most of the event for Mom on Sunday outside, which is the way I had it planned, as long as it doesn't get ungodly hot. And I don't think it will. Let's see. Grass pollen is rated high here in Rogue River proper. The air quality index for the region is in the good range at 21 parts per million, and that daytime UV index is very high at level 9. So take care. Barometric pressure is falling at 30.08 inches. Visibility is up to 10 miles. And relative humidity is at 62%. So we continue to dry out. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, and that is the Weather Underground. London is 75 degrees and fair. Paris is 83 and sunny with a thunderstorm advisory. Rome is 85 and sunny. Kabul is 78 and clear. Hong Kong is 73 and mostly cloudy. Tokyo is 75 and mostly cloudy. Auckland is 46 and fair. San Francisco is 46 and partly cloudy. Chicago, Illinois is 66 and sunny with a beach hazard advisory, so look out for floating debris like drift logs. And New York, New York is 78 degrees Fahrenheit and partly cloudy. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Jeff at the World Desk of the Associated Press brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. Russia's foreign minister said yesterday, Wednesday, it has revoked the accreditation of the chief correspondent of Austria's public broadcaster, ORF, O-R-F, and told her to leave the country in response to Austria's expulsion of the chief correspondent for the Russian state news agency TASS. The ministry said Carola Schneider, the ORF's Moscow bureau chief, was asked to hand over her media accreditation and leave Russia in the nearest time. It described the move as a forced retaliatory measure linked to the continuing discrimination of Russian media representatives in Austria, noting that it followed Austrian authorities earlier this week ordering Irina Davidian, TASS bureau chief in Vienna, to leave the country. 2 weeks ago, the foreign ministry told ORF correspondent Maria Nips Witting to leave Russia in what it described as response to Austria's removal of TASS correspondent Ivan Popov's accreditation. Schneider's expulsion marks the latest move by Russian authorities against foreign journalists in the country. It coincided with the start of the trial on yesterday, of Wall Street Journal correspondent Evan Gershkovich, who has been in custody since his arrest in March of 2023 on espionage charges that he, his employer, which is the Washington Post, and the U.S. government deny. But since Trump said he's not getting out until Trump becomes president, I guess he's being held hostage. Well, he is. Paula Flores and Megan Janetsky of the Associated Press World Desk bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. Led by a top general vowing to restore democracy, armored vehicles rammed the doors of Bolivia's government palace yesterday, Wednesday, in what the president called a coup attempt, then quickly retreated. The latest crisis in the South American country, facing a political battle and an economic crisis. Within hours, the nation of 12 million people saw a rapidly moving scenario in which the troops seemed to take control of the government of President Luis Arce. He vowed to stand firm and named a new army commander who immediately ordered the troops to stand down. Soon, the soldiers pulled back, along with a line of military vehicles, ending the rebellion after just 3 hours. Hundreds of Arce's supporters then rushed the square outside the palace, waving Bolivian flags, singing the national anthem, and cheering. The soldiers' retreat was followed by the arrest of Army Chief General Juan Jose Zuniga, after the Attorney General opened an investigation. Well, that was quick, which proves it can be done, right? Right. Government Minister Eduardo del Castillo said that in addition to Zuniga, former Navy Vice Admiral Juan Arnez Salvador was also taken into custody. Late Wednesday, Defense Minister Edmundo Novio said everything was now under control, surrounded by new military chiefs appointed by ARS. Novio said that Bolivia lived a failed coup. The coup attempt came as the country has faced months of tensions and political fights between ARS and his one-time ally, former leftist President Morales. It also came amid a severe economic crisis. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we will meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Robe à fleurs, sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair. T'embrasser les yeux ouverts, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.